Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joni Spain, and I'm a career advisor in the Office of Entrepreneurship and Career Development at the Jacobs School of Music. We're pleased to partner with the IU Alumni Association and our colleagues in the Alumni Affairs Office at Jacobs on a virtual road trip to catch up with alumni and friends around the country and learn more about starting creative careers in these dynamic cities. Tune into the OECD YouTube channel or the video section of our Facebook page to see our previous stops in New York City, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles. Today, the final leg of our journey finds us in Music City, USA, Nashville, Tennessee. It's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's discussion. Arts administrator, musician, and entrepreneur Janet Jerial has personally negotiated and serviced over 800 engagements worldwide through JEJ Artists, the Nashville-based boutique talent agency she founded in 1996. Her select roster of artists are featured in major motion pictures, television, radio broadcasts, and perform internationally with leading orchestras, music festivals, opera houses, and concert series. She's spearheaded national nonprofit initiatives on behalf of her artists' personal missions and facilitated commissioned works for and by her artists. On behalf of her artists, Janet has worked with the Metropolitan Opera, the Apollo Theater, Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, Moscow Symphony Orchestra, Deutsche Oper Berlin, Vienna State Opera, Paris National Opera, San Francisco Opera, Philadelphia Orchestra, Pittsburgh Symphony, Cape Town Opera in South Africa, the National Endowment for the Arts, Kennedy Center, World Expo Shanghai, and more. Janet received a Master of Arts in Arts Administration from Indiana University and a Bachelor of Arts in Music from Mercer University. Janet, thank you so much for being with us today. Take it away.
Thank you, Joni. It's such a pleasure to be here and an honor to be with this incredible panel today. The music industry on this panel, the music industry diversity on this panel is really exciting to me because we have representation from recording, production, artist management, arts administration, classical and jazz, string, saxophone, and organ. I mean, we're covering it here. And all of our panelists are IU alumni, so I believe we can field a wide range of beneficial topics. So let's get to it. First, we want to hear from Terry Talk. Terry is the president of the IU Alumni Chapter in Nashville. Terry, what a bright surprise when I discovered that you and I were going to be on this panel together. Terry and I were in a prototype group together for the Indiana University Alumni Association Career Services led by the incredible Aaron Irwin over there. So that's how we met. Terry is a lifetime member of the IU Alumni Association and a member of the U.S.A. Executive Council. She's been the president of the Nashville chapter since 2017. She's a lifelong Hoosier, having been born and raised in Carmel, just up the road from Bloomington, long before all those cornfields became roundabouts. She juggled a family while completing her BS from Bloomington School of Continuing Studies, went on to hold middle and executive management positions in the corporate sector for 25 years and 22 years in the nonprofit sector, mostly for the Girl Scouts. Terry, tell us more about what the Nashville Alumni Chapter has to offer.
Okay, well, what we do outside of COVID, right now, everything that we are doing is virtual, but I'd like to share what we do when we are permitted to do face-to-face. Of course, we do game watches. We do those at a couple of places in Nashville just because of the geographics of our constituency. So we do things at Cool Springs Brewery in the Galleria Ball area. And then we used to do things at Boombah's East, but unfortunately it was destroyed during the tornadoes earlier this year. But they are rebuilding, and hopefully we will be back there or to a temporary location once we get to meet face to face. But we do football and basketball game watches primarily. We often pair with other alumni groups because it's a great fun rivalry that we can get going during those game watches. And we also do typically when Straight No Chaser has a show in Nashville, we will do a meet and greet with them prior to their show. Have done a couple of those at the Ryman, which is quite exciting. We also promote other IU alumni that have the music connections, such as Joshua Bell, and then Clayton Anderson is in the country realm of music that is an IU alum. What our community service projects that we do, we have in the past until COVID is not allowing outside folks to come in. We have prepared dinners at the Ronald McDonald House for those people who are staying there while their children are being hospitalized. And then we have annually done a joint venture with the Purdue alumni at Hope Lodge, which is where cancer patients who live too far to travel back and forth for doctor's checkups, or maybe they are undergoing a series of treatments, they can stay there at no charge with a caregiver. So we will do dinners with them for them as well. And we have a very fun rivalry with Purdue for dessert. It's a dessert challenge between Purdue and IU. The residents vote on which one they like the best, and the winning chapter gets to hold until the next time of a competition. We have a mini open bucket that goes back and forth. And we are fortunate that before this year shut down, we did that event, and IU won the dessert competition. So we now have the old open bucket to take around to game watches or, show on display whenever we are out and about in the community.
It's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us. I did not know about that kind of community involvement you all are doing at the Ronald McDonald House and the other very worthy causes around there. That's fantastic. Good to know about that. And hopefully once COVID is done, there's going to be some more live music things that we can do with IU alums and things like that. That's terrific. Thank you, Terry. Thank you.
And I'll put our social media links. I see somewhat that the Facebook page is in there, but we also, of course, have Twitter and Instagram, and we also have a LinkedIn page.
Great. Thank you. Thanks a bunch. It's great to see you.
You too.
So now let's turn our attention to the music industry panelists that we have and the IU grads that we have from Jacobs here with us today. And our first music industry panelist is Alan Umstead. Alan and I met a few years ago by coincidence through LinkedIn, and then discovered how many connections we have in common. Not only IU connections. For starters, his lovely wife, Kathy, is also an amazing violinist, and she's from Macon, Georgia, and I'm from that same area. So we knew tons of people in common from both connections. It's a small world, really. And when Joni asked me if I knew of someone well connected in the Nashville music industry, I knew Alan would be the best person I know for this panel. He has been a full-time recording musician for over 35 years and has personally taken part in the recording of over 20,000 songs, jingles, movie and video game scores. He was the principal violinist of the National Orchestra of Venezuela and the Hong Kong Philharmonic, and the assistant concertmaster of the Nashville Symphony. He's toured around the world. He's a distinguished chamber musician as well as a consummate studio musician. He is the founder of Nashville Music Scoring and the go-to scoring contractor for today's top film and video game, album, and commercial jingle companies. I had the distinct privilege of sitting in on one of Alan's recent recordings for a huge video game soundtrack. It was amazing to watch the process, hear the creme de la creme of artists that he assembled from around the country for the recording. And so today, I'm thrilled that Alan joins us from the studio in Nashville. Welcome, Alan.
Well, thank you so much, Janet. I don't know that I can live up to that hype.
Oh, it's all true. So let's just start with, you are one of the leading contractors for instrumental orchestras and ensembles in this part of the country.
Yes.
You're constantly hiring musicians from around the country for a wide range of projects that take place in Nashville. So early in a career, it's sometimes much more important to know what not to do than what to do to be hired by a contractor like yourself. So give us your best advice, maybe your top 3 pieces of do's or don'ts for these young artists coming into Nashville trying to carve out a career.
Sure, sure. I'd be happy to. I mean, as you can imagine, I get literally dozens of resumes and inquiries from people from around the country, especially these days, wanting to know how they would possibly get a position with my group. And there are obviously good and bad ways to do this sort of thing. A resume, generally speaking. My organization doesn't hold an audition like an orchestra would hold an audition, where there you just have a set time and people come, because I'd be spending 3/4 of my time just auditioning people. So what I generally do is ask somebody to send a resume, send links to representative playing that they have on the internet. And that's sort of like a first round sort of thing. If they have some contacts in the community doing something like that, that people that we would know that could recommend them. But generally, that's the best first impression, is get the resume in. Don't pad it with 1,000 things. I don't need to know what you did in elementary school, or how many years you've been playing the violin or anything like that. But basically from college on, keep it short, keep it 1 page. 2 pages at the most, and make sure there are links in there. And the important thing here is, I'm sort of, it's really important these days to have a really great social media presence. And that can be a website, it can be a Facebook page, it can be a YouTube channel. But that's my first line of way that I check out people, is online. And quite honestly, there are a lot of people that have things posted that they probably ought to reconsider posting, because if it's not your best work, and I've got like a minute, and I happen on your video and I go, I don't know that that's a good fit for us. That may be the last chance I get to look at you, or something like that. So make sure that first impression is really good. And I know that IU now, at least I don't know for all recitals, but tape a lot of the recitals and stuff, and put up the best example of your work. And I think that's the most important thing. A website, ideally, only because on a Facebook site, I have to wade through a lot of your personal information in order to find what I'm really looking for, was like how you play. And then also, I get a lot of resumes that it's very obvious that people have just sent them out to 100 different people, and it's nothing specific towards me. It's not like, hey, I've followed your organization for a long time. I'm familiar with your work. This is something I always want to do. It's sort of like a boilerplate resume, and that doesn't show as much interest to me in specifically looking for working for my organization. So I look for people that have some idea of what I actually do, and what the kind of people I would hire. And also, and probably thirdly, just make sure that the information you give me relates to what I do. I'm basically an orchestral contractor, so I contract large orchestras for sessions. And sending me a tape of you playing in a country band really doesn't tell me anything about your playing or how you're going to work in my kind of situation. And it's amazing how many people I'll ask for videos, and they'll send a picture of them. They're playing in an orchestra. Well, I can't tell anything about you. I can say that's a good orchestra, it's a bad orchestra, but I can't tell anything about you. So you just make sure that your message is targeted to, whether it's me or anyone else that you're looking to work with, that it's targeted directly to them.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question that I didn't even have on my list, but you mentioned social media, and maybe we should just pop on that for 1 second if we can.
Sure.
Have you ever stumbled across someone looking for work that's contacted you and you've stumbled across their social media and it's been negative and it's impacted you negatively? Because I think there's so much social media out there. I don't know that we can have enough good advice for our young artists coming up in our world, that it's really important to keep a real positive social media presence.
Yeah, well, my personal opinion on that, and it's a very important point, is social media is a double-edged sword. It can be a great vehicle for promoting yourself, but it also, anything you post on there in some form is going to remain there for the rest of your life. And you have to be a little careful because, I mean, people that are going to hire you are going to come from all different backgrounds and all different mindsets and stuff. And especially in my particular business, well, it doesn't matter whether you're doing a rhythm section or full orchestra. You need to have a bunch of people that get along, that are respectful of each other and all that. And if you see a site where some people are blasting this person or this group of people and stuff like that, in any direction, that can be a divisive thing in a recording studio. And whether it's a small group or a large group, and we're all coming together to make the best music that we can. And people have to leave their personal opinions about some things aside, at least while you're in the studio. And I think some people do themselves a disservice by, especially, that's why I'm saying I almost prefer a website to a Facebook page, because Facebook page, I'm going to see like every comment you made about everything. I'm going to have to fish through it. Whereas a website, you can target exactly what you want me to see. And these days, you can get a free website anywhere. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It just has to be, targeted towards the job you're looking for.
Good advice. I echo what you're saying about the website. I think everybody needs one, just a very clean, simple one at that. But so tell us about your career path, Alan, because it's really fascinating to know all the things that you've done. It's a great example for young artists that these career paths take a lot, they evolve over time. I'm curious to know about Nashville music scoring. Was there an aha moment that caused you to go, bam, this is what I need to do? Or did it sort of evolve over time and just sort of take on a life of its own?
Yeah, well, it definitely evolves nothing happens overnight in this business. So, I mean, I graduated in 1978 from IU. At that time, I thought I was going to be an orchestral musician. That's what I wanted to do with my life. I played in a few orchestras overseas, and that just happened to be the major recording centers for those particular continents. And immediately got on recording, and I realized, wow, I didn't even know this existed as a career choice when I was in school. And I thought, well, this is something I really enjoy doing. It's something that I'm good at because I've always been a good sight reader. And I thought, well, maybe my career path as an orchestra musician is not what I wanted to do. And so when I moved back to the United States, I had a choice of just really, at that time, two cities where you could make a living recording, and that was Nashville and LA. And I had come from some very crowded, populous cities, and didn't want to spend 2 hours in my car every day and everything. So I thought, well, Nashville's a place. And also Nashville, especially since we're talking to IU people here, I mean, the close proximity to IU, I knew people that were here. There are a large number of IU graduates here. So there was a little more of a network for me to come here initially than out in LA, where I might not have known anybody to start out. And not that I wouldn't have gotten to the same place, but it might have not been as easy because I did have people that I knew in school and that could help me out and recommend me and sort of thing. So, I mean, I was basically what they call a sideman for 20 years, but I'm sort of honing my craft, getting known. And as the longer you're in that, you get opportunities to contract things. And so it sort of grew and grew until the point where a lot of our record work was going away because as the recording industry for records is not what it was 10, 15 years ago. We were swamped for 25 years. I mean, every single day, all day long. So, but a lot of that work has gone away with streaming services and stuff. So we were looking at other options for, it was like, okay, well, I don't know that we're going to be able to make a full-time living just playing records. So then I had some contacts in the media recording, so video games initially, and then later TV and movies. And I said, hey, we've got this great orchestra here. We actually have time now for a change, that we can actually fit projects in. Would you be interested in recording here? They didn't realize that was even an option for Nashville, and once they came here, they were blown away. And literally, it's almost been doubling every year ever since for the last 10, 15 years. So that's sort of how we got into it. I mean, we'd always had a recording orchestra here, but it was primarily records. And with the market shifting, you got to be flexible. I mean, that's what I'd say to everybody. What you think you're going to start out doing, the opportunities may lie elsewhere, and just being open to those opportunities, and setting a goal for yourself is really what caused all this to happen.
That's great. A great point. Great advice. Being open to opportunities. I mean, if we haven't learned that from 2020, I'm not sure if we've learned anything. We've all had to pivot quickly, or even at least entertain pivoting.
Yeah.
So,
I've pivoted 2, 3, 4 times in my career, but you know what? They were all the right moves, because if you're going one direction and you see the industry go in another direction, you either need to think about going in that other direction or finding some other line of work, because if you're not going to provide what the market wants, it's going to be a difficult road for you.
well, you've beautifully walked into one of my next questions, and that is, you and I share the philosophy of the importance for performing artists to think and act entrepreneurially. I teach music business for Mercer, my undergraduate alma mater, and I stress the concepts that you are a business and you have to approach a musical career path with that in mind. So tell us a little bit about that philosophy. I know you and I have talked a tiny bit about this, but how have you defined the entrepreneurial side of your music career?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's in this day and age, it's essential. I mean, 40 years ago, you would practice a lot when you're at college, take 100 auditions, and if you were lucky, you'd win one of them, and you'd play in a symphony orchestra, and theoretically, you're set for life. But of course, with orchestras going out of business all the time, that's not even the case anymore. But for the 99.9% of the musicians out there, playing in New York Philharmonic is probably not realistic. I mean, even if you're a great player, it's just a total crapshoot. So, making yourself marketable is the way to really survive in this business. And I don't care what side of it you're in, whether you're doing church music or weddings or recordings. There really is no way to do it without being an entrepreneurial, at least to be successful with it. All the people I know who have done really well in this business are entrepreneurial. You don't sit at home, wait and say, hey, I'm a great player. I'm going to sit home, wait for people to call me because I'm a great player. Because, your phone's probably not going to ring, or you're not going to get those emails anymore. It really, I know some people, a lot of classical musicians it's sort of like a dirty word to actually promote yourself and do self-promotion, but it's totally essential in this market, and in this day and age. There's just no way around it. And I think I've talked to several college groups, about similar sort of things, and tied the entrepreneurship with it. And I said, listen, when I was at IU, I was far from the best violinist there. I mean, I was probably right in the middle of the pack. And there are a lot of incredible violinists there, but a lot of them did not go on to great careers. I've been far enough removed for it so that I can say, know how things turned out for people, and the level of talent didn't always relate to how well they did in their careers. And it's because in a lot of cases, because these people did not do what it takes to be, as an entrepreneur, to promote themselves and to develop a career. Also, when you're an entrepreneur, you control your destiny. When you're not, somebody else controls your destiny. And I've always been a person that liked having a little more control over things.
Good. Well, thanks for all of that. That's All very good information and really good insight, I think, for young artists to think about. And so, I know that you are well connected around in our area, not just for spearheading studio work. I know you also help churches and community organizations who hire ensembles, say for seasonal services during the year or other special things. What are some other places that young artists can look for work other than studio work?
Well, the fortunate thing about Nashville, and I think one of the reasons Nashville has been successful as a music city, is the wide variety of work opportunities here. I mean, it's sort of mind-boggling, quite honestly. I mean, there are people make really good livings just playing weddings. There are people that make really good livings in the church. And music is such a central part of life here compared to a lot of places that it's unfathomable that a church wouldn't have live music, or that a person would have a wedding with only an orchestra, with only pre-recorded music or something like that. And also, even in the area, there are a lot of local orchestras within a 1 or 2 hour drive. A lot of people will play in several of these orchestras. It gets them orchestral experience, and it gives them a base. And quite honestly, the freelance players here, I mean, when I first came to town, I'd get my 1099s at the end of the year. I probably had 60 or 70 of them from different people that were hiring me for different things. Maybe each one of them didn't pay me a great wage, but all put together, it was a good living. And then the same thing with teaching and everything like that. There's so many opportunities here that in most cities are not the case, because I know people around the country, and it's not the case where there's a tremendous amount of freelance work for people to get into. And quite honestly, even with COVID going, well, COVID has sort of changed things a little bit, but even up to this point, I think Nashville probably is the only music center in the United States where the work is actually growing rather than contracting. And as a result, there's been a very large influx of people coming here from other places and other recording centers like New York and Los Angeles and Chicago. So because you go to where the work is, and the work's right here.
Yeah, I agree. Man, the influx into Nashville has been pretty incredible in the last few years.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, thank you. What incredible insight you've given us. And I expect that we're probably going to be circling back around for some other questions that people are going to have for you. But I'd like to move on to our terrific 3 young Jacobs graduates that we have so privileged to have with us today. So I'd like to start with Rashawn Barber. And Rashawn is a saxophonist, but he's a lot more than a saxophonist. His career encompasses performing and recording in a ton of musical styles: jazz, blues, funk, classical, fusion, soul, Latin, and world music. He has a very passionate approach to music making, and this has enabled him to appear on some really huge stages with some incredible artists: the Temptations, Delfeo Marsalis, the Spanish Harlem Orchestra, Duffy Jackson, Winard Harper, Kirk Franklin. I love Kirk Franklin, and the Wooten Brothers. He has performed on great stages of the world, from the Ryman to Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, to the National Museum of African American History. And in addition to all of this and leading cutting edge ensembles, he's a music educator. Yay! With a distinguished teaching career. And currently he's teaching at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And maybe he's going to tell us a little bit about that. I'm wondering if he's doing that remotely from Nashville, or if he's traveling back and forth. And he's also a regular clinician and masterclass artist around the country. If you'd like to know a little bit more about Rashawn, you can find out at nashvilljazz.org. But Rashawn, tell us a little bit about jazz in Music City, because everyone automatically thinks country, but you have carved out an enviable career in jazz here. So let us hear all about that.
Well, and thank you so much for such a tremendous introduction. Before I say anything, I just want to say I hope all of the students, what Alan just said is a textbook's worth of information about the unique qualities that Nashville offers. So I will try to not just kind of echo all of that, but trying to bring something else to it. But there's so much there that that you should, maybe listen to again. I see this is being recorded, but take all that to heart, because that's super helpful stuff. When it comes to jazz in Nashville, I feel fortunate. I feel like I had the inside track because I was born there, and because I was born there and named after a great jazz musician. My twin brother and I were named after Rahsaan Roland Kirk, and so as young instrumentalists, even in the high school, at the high school level, I think the musicians that were there kind of wrapped their arms around us, so to speak. So great musicians: Jim Ferguson, bassist; Chester Thompson, drummer; the late Jim Williamson on trumpet. Just really great musicians that I was fortunate enough to grow up with an awareness of in high school. And I realized that, because in Nashville, because music is such a central part of life. I remember seeing, Dennis Soley, a great saxophone player, on the news, but he was backing up a country artist. But I knew Dennis Soley from the jam sessions on Tuesday nights, standards. And so it wasn't this either or that we tend to think of in music, where it's like, oh, this person's a jazz artist, or this person's a studio musician, or this person is that. I remember being 17 and 18 and going, wait a minute, that's Chester Thompson was doing this jazz gig last night. And now he's on my TV with Phil Collins. And so knowing sort of those sorts of opportunities were there for musicians who also played jazz. It never really seemed to me to be a music town, and as you said, Music City, but not a town that I wouldn't fit into as a jazz artist. And so when I moved back there, the education part is a central part I'll talk about as well, because I moved back at 25, and my friends that were in New York, I did my master's degree with my twin brother in Manhattan School of Music. And my friends who were in New York went, yeah, man, be honest, there's not really any like great jazz players down there in Nashville, right? And I won't repeat my full response, but it was a disagreement, suffice to say. I felt like in a lot of ways there was much more authenticity in the jazz tradition with the musicians in Nashville than the plenty of musicians that I encountered in New York who had really only dealt with jazz in the academic setting or within academia. When I got back to Nashville, I was very fortunate in the sense that I did a gig at a local jazz club at the time, F. Scott's. And, jazz gigs, especially at that point for me in my career, jazz gigs weren't paying a fortune, but there is this thing we call networking. And so I was fortunate enough to call, or I would say fortunate, maybe it was whatever, youth that you have is like, I think at 25, I went, oh, it'd be great to play with Chester Thompson. I'll see if he'll do the gig. And it's a gig that does not at all pay what he's worth. He said yes and did the gig. And on the break, we were talking, and he said, man, let me know. There might be some opportunities. Let me know when you get your master's degree. And I said, well, actually, I'm back. I just got back from New York and I just finished it. I'm here. And he went, oh yeah, okay, I'll call you on Monday. And he ended up not calling me on Monday. He forwarded my number to Jeff Kirk, who was over the commercial music program at Belmont University. Jeff Kirk called me on Monday. I had just gotten back to town. I moved back to Nashville in May, and in August, I was the saxophone instructor at Belmont University. This is a really, as much as I would say, this is a rare sort of occurrence, there were things that I had already done that strengthened an argument such that if someone were to say, well, what is this 25-year-old kid going to bring our saxophone studio? At that point, because of the entrepreneurial background, that the answers were, well, he's already got 2 records out that have been celebrated and feature really great musicians. He's already working with these really great musicians, and then at that point, that opened the door so that then when they looked into my playing and teaching, they went, oh well, yeah, there's no reason not to do this. And I find that for me, my first record was with my twin brothers, the Barber Brothers Jazz Quintet. We were 19 when it was recorded. And I'm not saying I recommend that. Looking back on it, it probably would have been hipper to wait a little bit, but you kind of know as an artist, if you've devoted your life to a particular craft, you know when you're on to something. And I think I think in some ways, people in the Nashville area where we were in high school knew it before we knew it. I auditioned for Manhattan School of Music as a master's student, and I had no idea I was going to end up with a full tuition scholarship. No clue. My jaw was on the ground when I opened the envelope, and I went, well, David Baker said, well, you've got to go, and now I've got to go. So for me,
we all do whatever David Baker told us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Getting back to Nashville, those things were in place already. And so I didn't know how important they would be, particularly in academia, but it gave me a foothold to start at the collegiate level of instruction. And that even as an adjunct, it was kind of groundbreaking, especially in 2005, to be the teacher of a saxophone studio at 25 years of age. In the way that I think also helped Belmont address things that they wanted to address as well. So, for me, it's been a career of wanting to have options and realizing that Nashville is a town where people, we always say it's in the ears. People have the ears, and when they hear it, they know the difference. And so I've always enjoyed being in a town that worked that way, such that I can more or less create a career in jazz, and then a big 2-year tour with Kelly Clarkson comes along, and the trumpet player on the gig goes, no, get that guy. That's who we want on saxophone. Mm-hmm. And from talking with him, I know that immediately, they punched my name into Google and they went, wait, the jazz guy? We want that guy? And he went, no. Like, that's him playing jazz. He'll play this as well as he plays jazz.
Yeah.
And, the ability for musicians to hear those qualities and that it's kind of an old school town in that way, which I've always loved, is that the musicians that show up and play and, as Alan was saying, can get along with others. Because the business does change, and we all have friends in this business that as the business changes, sometimes people want to dig their heels in or kind of create a monument to the past. And it's not really the right business to do those things and to be successful. Sometimes you just have to, most times I think you have to go the way that the wind blows, or realize, that when it's time to go a different direction. For me personally, I've spent the better part of the last 15 years playing 200 to 250 shows a year. But the way to do that is you're gone quite a bit. You're on the road quite a bit. And for me, it got to a certain point where, those of us that have been involved or in relationships with people that have lived those sorts of lifestyles, it can complicate the personal life quite a bit. And for me, I don't have, children yet. I don't have a wife yet, but those are things that I'm really passionate about. And there's a point where I kind of went, wait a minute, maybe there's one of the challenges here is that I'm gone all the time, and so it caused me to, I'm thankful that I'd had that background that started at IU with music education that made me competitive to go start a doctoral program last year, and then join a great faculty here at University of North Carolina. Not necessarily, I haven't finished the doctorate, but they kind of look at it and look at all that's been accomplished and go, yeah, you'll finish the doctorate. We know that. You've got 7 years until a tenure hearing shows up, but we want you now. And I think a lot of that has to do with the skill set that's been cultivated, both as a performer and as an educator.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing so much and just sort of enhancing too what Alan had already shared too. We may have time to get back. I hope we get all the way around, but I'd like to go ahead and make sure we get to Nick and Kate. So let me introduce Nick Bergen. Nick is a freelance organist. He's a collaborative pianist and an editor. Way to diversify, Nick. We were all into that for entrepreneurship. He has served as an organist at several large churches, including Church of St. Michael and St. George in St. Louis, Christ Church Cathedral in Indianapolis, and First Presbyterian Church in Nashville. He's also an educator and has been an adjunct professor at Lipscomb University in Nashville and a collaborative pianist at Lipscomb and Belmont. And we just heard Rashawn talk about Belmont a little bit, also a great music place here. He also substitutes occasionally as an organist with the Nashville Symphony. And in addition to his work as a musician, he's a freelance copy editor. And he currently does work for the American Organist Magazine, Ancient Faith Publishing, and the University Press of Mississippi. So welcome, Nick. And
Thanks.
If you could walk us through your career path and especially your arrival in Nashville and the opportunities you created or found, and particularly maybe talk about organist subbing, because I know that organist subs are in great demand. And I'd like to know if you find that to be true and how you got on that sub circuit.
Sure. Well, thanks for the introduction. It's very humbling to be in the company of some really great musicians. So real quick, I grew up in Houston and I went to the Arts High School in Houston, which was a great experience. I did an undergrad degree at the Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore. I started there as a piano major and started to play the organ while I was there. So I finished at Peabody in 2009 with a bachelor's degree in organ. And I came to IU with a very strong interest in pursuing a career as a church musician. Real quick, my second year at IU, I took a semester off because the opportunity arose to do kind of a substantial internship at this church in St. Louis. So I got to do a lot of accompanying of pretty substantial repertoire. And it was a good kind of deep end of the pool experience. When I came back in the spring semester of 2011, my teacher, Jeanette Fishel, had been working as the interim organist at Christ Church Cathedral in Indy, and she was wanting to get out of that. And so I did that for about 7 months and got to work with Dana Marsh while I was there, who's now with the Historical Performance Institute at IU. So that was another kind of positive, but also sort of demanding sort of experience. So anyway, I finished the master's degree in 2012. And there was an opportunity at this church here in Nashville, First Presbyterian, which is a pretty large place. There's a sort of lively traditional music program. So I moved here to work there kind of as an interim. And after about 6 months, the church asked me to come on permanently and full time. And so that was a really fortunate sort of a thing. I mean, it was a great way to get plugged into Nashville. The music director there is also the professor. He's sort of the main choral conductor at MTSU, Middle Tennessee State, which is another sort of active music program in the area. And so, you know, we did, the church does a couple of concerts with a contracted orchestra every year. And so I would get to play like continuo in that. Then we would always have great brass players for Christmas and Easter. So it was a great way being connected to that church to get to know a lot of people in town. And then while I was at First Pres, I was also, the first couple of years I was singing here, I was living here, I sang in a choir called the Nashville Chamber Singers. Mm-hmm. And through that group got connected to Jerry Reed, who also sings in the group. And Jerry's the piano teacher at Lipscomb University. And he asked me to teach a class there at the school. So, you know, I was about 26 when I was hired to do that. And again, sort of a deep end of the pool experience, a bit stressful, but, you know, I learned a lot and had a lot of fun doing that. So I'd say about, so anyway, I did the church music thing full time, plus adjunct teaching at Lipscomb, and then you know, an occasional recording thing. There are not a ton of opportunities for organists in that world. But, you know, a couple of things here and there. So I kind of got to a place where I realized I didn't want my professional life to be hitched to my religious life. And so I kind of made a conscious decision to step back from church music. So I focused more on the collaborative piano thing recently. And then I've also sort of developed what started off as kind of a minor side hustle as a copy editor has become more and more of a sort of main thing. And especially, I've really leaned into that in the last, 10 months or so, because there have been fewer opportunities for, live music making around here. They're not gone, but it's, there's less of that. And I've also kind of focused more on sort of building up my own presence online. And I got an organ for the house a while back. And so I've been sort of figuring out ways to market myself that way. As far as subbing goes, anyone who's an organist will know that the way to do that is to get plugged into it, wherever you land, to get plugged in with the American Guild of Organists. Nashville has a really great chapter. A lot of people will know that one of Nashville's nicknames is the Buckle of the Bible Belt. So there are a lot of large sort of active church music programs here. And so, it's a great place to be an organist. The AGO community here is very collegial. The people are really nice.
That is very true.
Yeah, and I found also I've met a ton of IU grads here. Like, for example, in the Nashville Symphony, I don't know. I mean, they're just like more IU alums than I can count. And so I found it, that was something that I noticed right at the outset. I felt very comfortable. It was an easy transition to make from Bloomington to Nashville, just because there are so many IU alums around here. People are nice here. It's a nice place. It's not an overwhelming city. And just speaking about classical music in Nashville, two things. One is that, there are a lot of people here who have a really broad set of skills and who have a sort of really broad musical interests. So it's a great place to be if you're like that. But at the same time, the classical community itself is not like oversaturated, I find. Maybe that's changing some, but I found that, I think I've had some opportunities here as a classical musician that probably would have been harder to come by in a larger city. So that's been a neat thing too.
I tend to agree with that, Nick. I think it is a market that's still break-inable. And
yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. What I'm finding is that I could spend an hour with every person that's on this panel. You have so much to offer us today, and I know we're trying to fit into everybody's lunchtime. So goodness, I don't even know how to pack it all in, but I do want us to definitely hear from Kate Haldren, and she is a Nashville-based freelance audio engineer and drummer. So we're going to just change the stage altogether right here for a minute. She has a background in studio recording, analog tape machine recording and maintenance, and an extensive knowledge of vinyl mastering and the vinyl industry. I have been so intrigued with Kate, and I've been wanting to hear from her because this is so interesting. It's something I don't know anything about. I can't wait to hear what she's got to say. She came to Nashville immediately after graduating from Jacobs and began working at a studio called Welcome to 1979. And that's where she was for 3 years. Today, she primarily runs sessions out of her home studio in East Nashville. Boy, that's really very typical around here. I see Rashawn nodding. And she works as an on-location engineer for a production company called Our Vinyl. And when the world isn't on pause, she tours and plays drums for New West artist Lily Hyatt. So Kate, you have this amazing hybrid career, kind of like Nick's got his hybrid career going on, editing and performing. You're a performer and engineer. Do you think you need to have several income streams to make it all work in a town like Nashville? Give us your perspective.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you, all these amazing panelists. I've certainly learned a lot just from sitting here and joining in, so really appreciate being here. But yeah, I think as any kind of young artist just starting out, it's really helpful to have a few sets of skills that you can rely on. Just kind of like we've been touching on today. It's good to be flexible, and it's good to be able to be entrepreneurial and kind of pull from your different skill sets to piece things together and make it work. That's definitely certainly something that a lot of my peers do. Just to, as they're building their career and as you're starting out, it's really good to be able to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, good. So how competitive do you think studio work market is for drummers in Nashville?
It's pretty competitive. I think studio work in general is pretty competitive here. I think that it just kind of takes time. Like nothing happens overnight, like Alan said, and it just kind of like about being persistent and about sticking with it. And there's a ton of talent here in this town. So you know, if you're not available, there's 3 other people that can step up to the plate. So yeah, I think it's definitely very competitive in that regard, but it's doable as well. It takes time, and it takes persistence.
So could you talk to us about how you connected to the people in your specialized sector of recording in Nashville?
Sure. Yeah. So I moved to Nashville in 2015, and I found this studio that was close to where I lived at the time, called Welcome to 1979. And they have a vinyl mastering facility in-house, and they also do tape machine restoration and maintenance. And those things just really appealed to me. It's not something that I really knew anything about. I had worked on some tape machines in the past and was just really fascinated with that technology. And so I just was able to get an introduction to the studio and interned there, and then got hired on as an assistant, and then started, taking on sessions, and then started working on tape machines there. It was kind of like a secondary job that all the assistants do. You learn how to be a tech on their machines, which was awesome. I learned a whole lot. And then they offered me management position. So I started managing the studio, booking the studio, and then kind of taking on my own clients as an engineer as well. And yeah, so that was kind of how that started. It just started slowly, and I just kind of kept saying yes and kept working, and just putting myself in positions that I could advance. And then I was there for a little over 3 years, and just kind of felt like the time was right for me to break off and start doing my own thing. So I started freelancing pretty much full time October 2018. So it's been about 2 years doing that. So it's been a nice transition.
So interesting to me. It's just that I don't think about it too much. And then when I read your bio, it just really, the light bulbs went on, and I thought, wow, what a very cool niche, that you've gone into. Well, guys, I mean, I know we only have a few more minutes. First, I'd like to ask Alan and Joni, are there any questions we need to field from our chat? And if not, I've got a couple more to throw out there to the whole panel, but let's go there first for the people who are participating with us today.
What's been really wonderful in this session that's been different from other cities is people have been placing direct questions into the chat to our panelists, and our panelists are answering in the chat. So all of the questions are caught up, and everybody online is able to see their answers. So if you have a question for the panel in general, go for it.
I do. And also, if somebody on the panel has something you want to specifically speak about, come on, we want to hear it. But I want to get in a good plug today for the IU Alumni Association's career services, as well as the Jacob School OECD services that they provide, because both of these entities can truly put you way steps ahead in your career and ahead of your colleague competitors, because they have so many good resources to offer. We're kind of spoiled because we came from IU, that we had this kind of immersion and things. But I know that most schools don't offer what I call real world help. So I want to be sure that all of our people watching today know about those resources and that they will take advantage of it. And so I'm curious to know from our panel, I mean, Alan and I are way before we had somebody wonderful like Alana and Joni heading all this. But for the more recent grads, did you all take advantage of those career services that were there for you?
I didn't take that much advantage of it, but I think what I took advantage of, and I still do, is the connections to the members of faculty were there when I was there. Just this year, Tom Walsh, who was my saxophone instructor at Indiana University, I'm starting in with a new studio here at University of North Carolina. And the first call that I got, actually this time I didn't even reach out. He called me and he said, "Hey, so how are things looking down there? What are y'all up to? I'm seeing UNC on the news." And we talked for an hour. They continue to be the same level of resource they were when I was a student. And so all I would say is that, make the most of those relationships, because they were doing that before there was an office dedicated to it being done, and they continue to do that.
That is beautiful to hear, Rashawn. I have found that to be true with my teachers as well from IU, and I mean, I know I was in the arts administration side, but that's really a great encouragement for all young artists to stay in touch with those great connections from IU.
And Kate knows us well. Kate, you know us.
Yes, absolutely.
I know that there's been quite a bit of discussion all the way through about the alumni network and how powerful that is through word of mouth and just maintaining relationships and what have you. And I'm wondering if we could do a quick round of, how important that has been and how the relationships that you developed while you were studying at Indiana University propelled you into your career, no matter where you went.
Great question.
I'll say, just to kind of echo, I certainly got plugged into the job that I started out at in Nashville because of my teacher, Jeanette Fishel. So I don't know. I'm not sure that that's quite an answer to that question, but it's a similar thing. She pointed me in that direction, and I certainly make every effort to stay in touch with her and to just kind of keep those ties active. Yeah.
I'll echo something about that, even though I'm not a direct product of Jacobs. I kind of am, but it's a roundabout story. But one of the amazing artists that I have had the privilege to work for many years is Angela Brown, who is a direct product of the Jacobs School of Music. And I literally traveled the world with her, and not one time have I gone anywhere where we have not encountered some kind of connection to the IU Jacobs School of Music, wherever we happen to be in the world, whether it was Cape Town, South Africa, or Shanghai, China, or Minnesota, or wherever it happened to be. We always had a friend there. And wasn't that a beautiful thing that somebody did all that work way ahead of us that gave us this network and safety net for wherever we wanted to land in the world. And I'm grateful for that, frankly.
Janet, we have one question in the chat. Jake, do you want to unmute and ask your question to our panel? I think it's a great question to end on. Thank you.
Thanks, Joni.
Jake, do you want to ask? All righty. Jake's question is, what is the music community like in the Nashville suburbs? Are there strong education programs in classical and jazz in the area? So for whichever panelist would like to take that.
I'm happy to answer that. I mean, quite honestly, compared to maybe some other cities, not what as good as you think, not as much as you would think. I mean, I think arts education in a lot of places has suffered because of funding, problems and stuff. I think there are pockets that are better than others, but there's always room for improvement. I think, and especially, I can't speak to jazz, but I'm speaking about the classical side of things. There is some, but I think most of the education that is coming from private resources like the universities that have preschool, pre-college, and the like. It's not so much in the high schools and elementary schools.
I think I'd like to add one thing to that. I tend to agree with Alan, except we're out in Williamson County, and I have found that the choral programs, there are some pockets where the choral programs are exceptional. And my son, my oldest child, my son Hayes, was a product of the choral program, and it was amazing. The opportunities and the literature that they actually tackled was unbelievable. But I agree with Alan. I think it's in pockets, and you have to seek it out. And hopefully we're going to have a more widespread resurgence for championing arts education in those younger grades. That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Oh, and just to briefly add, Janet's totally correct. The choral and band side of things, especially in Williamson County, is actually quite good. I was speaking more from an orchestral perspective.
Yeah, right. Well, I just want to say thank you for an edifying hour that I would love to just go on and on with each one. And I feel very honored and humbled to be even a part of the panel. I thank Alan and Joni and everybody who's been a part today, and all the people who joined us remotely from wherever you are watching. And I'm going to turn it back over to our wonderful Jacobs team.
Thank you so much, Janet. It's been a wonderful hour, and we just want to thank all of our wonderful alumni panelists and our friend Terry Talk from the Alumni Association. Alan, thank you for your time and the generosity of spirit. Nick, Kate, Rashawn, we so appreciate your generosity and your time and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you all so much. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.